My friends, every so often, in the story of humankind, there comes a moment that catches the whole world by surprise. A moment when the expected path is broken, when history itself pauses, takes a breath, and begins to move in a new direction. We are standing in one of those moments right now, because a nation that many once saw only as a follower, a nation that some dismissed as a developing voice in the background of world affairs, has just stepped into the spotlight with a move so bold, so unexpected, that it has left even America speechless. That nation is India. Now, I know when we talk about nations and politics, it's easy to get lost in the headlines, the jargon, the talking points, but I want us to step back for a minute. I want us to think not just about governments or leaders, but about people, about what it means for a people to stand up and say in one voice, this is who we are, this is what we believe, and this is the future we choose. That, at its core, is what India has just done. And make no mistake, it takes extraordinary courage to do that in today's world. Courage is not just about standing tall when the cameras are rolling or when the crowd is cheering. Real courage is quiet. It's steady. It's choosing conviction over convenience. It's holding on to your principles when the pressure is heavy and the risks are real. India has shown that kind of courage. At a time when playing it safe would have been easier, when compromise would have been comfortable, when silence would have been the predictable path, India chose to act, and that action has reminded the entire world of something we too often forget. That sovereignty, the right of a people to determine their own path, is not just a word in a textbook. It is the living heartbeat of a nation. Think about what sovereignty really means. It means a farmer in the fields of Punjab, or a child walking to school in Kerala, or a family sitting down for dinner in Mumbai. All of them knowing that their future is not dictated by someone else's will, but by their own choices. It means that history, culture, and the hopes of millions are given the dignity of self-determination. For too long in our world, sovereignty has been treated like a privilege reserved for the powerful, something that belongs only to those who already hold the biggest armies or the deepest pockets. But India has just shattered that illusion. It has said sovereignty belongs to every nation that has the courage to claim it. And let's be honest, taking that stand is never easy. Behind every decision like this, there are warnings. There are late-night calls from powerful leaders. There are whispered threats of punishment. There are predictions of disaster from pundits and policymakers. That storm of pressure is real. But leadership is not tested when things are easy. Leadership is tested when the costs are high, when the risks are heavy, and when the voices around you say, don't do it, you will regret it. That is the test India just passed. It stood in the storm and chose to walk forward anyway. This is more than a political maneuver. This is a turning point, because India's choice forces us all to confront questions we'd rather avoid. Are we living in a world of true equality? Or are we living in a system where some nations make the rules while others are told to obey? If a country cannot act without being punished, then is sovereignty real at all? Or is it just an illusion? India's act of defiance has pulled back the curtain. It has exposed the double standards that so many have quietly accepted as normal. And by doing so, it has created space for a new conversation about what the future of global order should look like. Now let me be clear. This doesn't mean turning inward. This doesn't mean isolation. India has long been part of the global community, contributing to science, to peacekeeping, to trade, to culture. This moment is not about shutting the world out. It's about engaging with the world on equal terms. It's about saying, we will not just follow the script written for us by others, we will write our own story. And that message carries weight far beyond India's borders. Some will dismiss this act. They'll say it's reckless, a gamble, a mistake. But history has a way of proving doubters wrong. Remember, when America declared independence, the world said it would not last. When nations across Africa and Asia stood up against colonial powers, they were told they could not survive on their own. When small states defied empires, they were told they would be crushed. And yet, time and again, courage triumphed over fear. Conviction outlasted doubt. The future was shaped not by those who stayed silent, but by those who dared to act. India is now carrying that same torch into the 21st century. And here's the thing about courage. It spreads. When one nation stands tall, others start to believe they can too. Already in Africa, in Latin America, and smaller nations across Asia, voices are rising. They're asking, if India can do this, why not us? Why not now? That is how the world changes. Not with one sudden collapse of the old order, but with steady acts of courage that build into a movement too strong to ignore. Now, I'm not naive. Courage comes with the consequences. India may face criticism, sanctions, even attempts to isolate it. That's the price every nation pays when it chooses principle over pressure. But nations are not remembered for the comfort of their choices. They are remembered for the strength of them. And long after the noise of critics fades, the world will remember that India stood firm. Because the world respects courage, even when it pretends to be shocked by it. This moment also tells us something important about leadership. For much of modern history, we've equated leadership with dominance. The biggest military, the largest economy, the widest reach, those were the markers of power. But real leadership is not about forcing others into line. Real leadership is about setting an example that inspires others to follow. It's about showing the courage to act, even when it's unpopular, and in doing so, giving others permission to find their own courage. That's the kind of leadership India has demonstrated. Not leadership by domination, but leadership by dignity. And in the long run, that is the kind of leadership that lasts. For the people of India, this is about more than global headlines. This is about identity. It is about a nation reminding itself and the world that it will not be defined by anyone else's expectations, but by its own aspirations. Every child in Delhi, every young person in Bengaluru, every family in a small village knows now that their country is not just playing a role assigned by others, it is leading, and that pride, that sense of dignity, will fuel generations to dream bigger, aim higher, and believe more deeply in their own power. But this moment is not just about India, it's a mirror held up to the rest of the world. It asks each of us, what does sovereignty mean to us? Do we respect it only when it serves our interests? Or do we believe in it as a principle that belongs to all nations? Do we honor it when exercised by the strong, or do we honor it when exercised by the brave? These are questions we can no longer ignore. And here's something else. India's example points toward a new world order, one that is not built on a single superpower dictating terms, but on many nations sharing responsibility, a multipolar world. Now, I know that makes some people nervous. For those who are used to leading alone, it feels unsettling. For those used to following, it feels confusing. But multipolarity is also an opportunity, because in a world with many centers of power, no single nation can impose its will unchecked. Cooperation is no longer optional. It becomes a necessity. And that necessity opens the door for fairness, for dialogue, for voices that have been silenced for too long to finally be heard. Think about how different that is from the old model of dominance. Under dominance, trade agreements were shaped by coercion. Climate commitments were driven by pressure, not responsibility. Smaller nations were told to align their policies not with their people, but with someone else's preferences. That wasn't sovereignty, that was permission disguised as independence. And permission is not freedom. What India has shown us is that leadership in this century doesn't have to look like that. Leadership can be rooted in values. It can be rooted in the courage to resist domination and in the dignity to inspire others. This is not an accident. India's ability to take this stand is born from a civilization with thousands of years of history, a culture that has endured conquest and colonialism and yet emerged with its identity intact, a tradition of resilience and dialogue that makes it possible to imagine leadership not as domination but as shared inspiration. The depth of history gives India the strength to say, we can do things differently. And so, my friends, what we are witnessing is not just another headline in the news cycle. It is a redefinition of leadership itself, a shift from a world where the few dominate to a world where the many participate, from a world where power was concentrated in one place, to a world where power is shared, from a world built on fear to a world that can be built on hope. Now, debates will come. Critics will argue. There will be those who say this move is unwise, that it will not last, that it cannot hold. But history will not measure this moment by the voices of doubt. History will measure it by the chain of events it sets in motion, by the new alliances it inspires, the movements it unleashes, the leaders who find their own courage because they saw India stand tall. One day, when future generations look back, they will say this was the moment when the world began to shift from dominance to dignity, from hierarchy to equality,